This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to Award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I am your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you an overview of old school referees, and by that I mean some of the referees that were around during the early days of the NBA. And the reason I want to share this is because refereeing in the NBA has changed significantly over the years. What the referees do today and how they are evaluated by the league is practically a different world from how referees were monitored in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So, to better understand how the old school refs did their job, let me first set the stage by reviewing what new school referees go through. Now, just like players themselves, getting to be a referee in the NBA is the pinnacle of the basketball referees pyramid. Typically, a referee starts out by refereeing youth games or possibly high school games. They go through a weekend-long training on the rules and how the calls are to be handled. Then they get their license in the state where they live and they begin to referee some games. Now, if that referee can prove himself or herself, then they might get assigned to handle playoff games or even the state high school championship tournament. Now, assuming all of that goes well, then the referee may apply or be offered a spot as a college or university level referee. And just to be clear, referees are scouted in a similar way to how players are scouted. Every level is looking for new referees and they typically scout one level down in order to find them. High school referees are scouted by college level directors of refereeing, and then college referees are scouted by the NBA or other professional leagues, just like the way the players are scouted. Anyway, now let us assume that we have a hypothetical referee and a very good referee. The referee not only applies the rules consistently, but also has great people skills in dealing with players and coaches, and it is very likely that the referee does a great job explaining and communicating to the players what exactly the foul was. Now, if all of this is true, then our referee might have a chance to work in the NBA and get to work with the best basketball players in the world. And it is no easy job. These players are the fastest and strongest around. The action is so much faster than in any of the lower levels. And I used to coach youth basketball when my kids were young, and you could measure the speed of the action with a sundial. Everything about 5 and 6-year-old basketball players is going to be slow, and then you watch an NBA game and everything is moving at lightning speed. There is almost no break. As soon as one team scores, the other team has already inbounded the ball and is attacking in the other direction. There is no time to rest. These referees have to be able to keep up as they run up and down the court with the players and call fouls when they see them. And I know that today's referees get a bad rap because they seem like robots. They call all fouls the same way, and there is very little room for interpretation in today's NBA. Everything is very tightly defined, and if a player violates a rule, the whistle is blown. Now, here is the last thing that I will say about new school refs that you may not know. Every referee in the NBA is graded on every single game that they work. As soon as the game is complete, the entire game is reviewed by the officiating staff at the NBA's officiating headquarters in New Jersey. They have an entire team of people, many of whom are former referees, who review and grade every single game on the current referees. They go through every call that the referee made and grade them on whether or not that was a good call or a good application of the rules. They also look for missed calls. If a player shuffles his feet before dribbling, but the referee does not call anything, then that is considered a missed traveling call. That is a negative on the referee. Now, the referee then gets a report card the morning after every game that they work, and these grades are then kept on file with the NBA. And at the end of every season, the worst performing referees, according to those report cards, are dismissed. In other words, they are fired or sacked. The goal of the NBA is that all referees are consistent. That means that players and coaches should ideally expect that every game gets called the same way, no matter which referees are working the game. But things are not so easy. Referees are people, and they make mistakes just as players and coaches do. We have all seen players simply lose the ball out of bounds, or miss a dunk, or send a pass way over his teammate's head. We also see coaches make bad substitutions or call the wrong play that results in a turnover. As fans, we sometimes say things like, "Well, it's okay, it's just one mistake, you are human." That just happens sometimes. But we do not give the same allowance for referees. We expect that referees are absolutely perfect on every single play, and that is just impossible. But I will say that NBA referees get way more calls correct than they get incorrect. And the very best referees get assigned to work playoff games. And the absolute cream of the crop, they get to work the NBA Finals. Now, this is a good place to take a break, and I'll be back with the old school referees.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports history fans. I'm Ross from the podcast Pigskin Tales. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment. But first, let's dive into today's sponsor, just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique, budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched into words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. My favorite on the site is Bryce Harper 2021 MVP year. Because I'm a big stats guy, I think that's one of the coolest things ever. Check it out. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved one this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those who you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for 15% off at artofwords.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
Welcome back to the show, and let us continue on our review of old school referees. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, referees were not monitored like they are today. First of all, very few games are even filmed back then. There is no tape or record of the games. Whatever the referees did during a game might have been reported to the commissioner. Back then, that was Maurice Podoloff. The commissioner just had to take people's word for it. Now, if a coach sent in a complaint about a certain referee on a certain foul, then the commissioner would contact the referee to get his side of the story and then make his best judgment. Everything the commissioner heard was basically he said. However, what this did was that it allowed referees to develop their own individual styles. Each referee brought something different to the game, and coaches and players had to learn the referees like they learned the plays of their opponents. For example, one of the most famous referees from the early days was a guy named Sid Borgia. He was known to be a referee that was friendly to the away team. And I mean, that was his reputation. There was something about making calls in favor of the away team that really got him excited. He loved fighting the home crowd. He loved antagonizing them and getting yelled at. That just made the game more fun for him. It got his adrenaline flowing. So if you were the away team and you saw Sid Borgia walk into the gym, then you were happy because you knew that you had a real chance of winning that road game. One time, Sid Borgia called a Washington Capitals player for traveling, and Capitals coach Red Auerbach exploded, saying that the player was pushed from behind. Therefore, it was not a travel by his player, but rather a push by the opponent. Borgia called it a forced walk. Now, you can imagine that Auerbach was ready to fight. What in the world was a forced walk? Borgia explained that there was definitely contact, but not enough contact to be deemed a foul. However, at the same time, the player did not take the extra step on his own. There was enough contact to force the extra step. So imagine that. Not enough contact to be called a foul, but enough contact to force the player with the ball to take an extra step? That is bananas, and Auerbach had to be held back, and that was the NBA of the 1950s. Also, Borgia loved fights. He almost never gave out fouls for fighting. He would simply separate the players, let them cool down, and then get the game restarted. So all the players knew that if Borgia was refereeing, you could get away with a lot of contact, maybe even a few punches, and Borgia would not call anything. Borgia would simply say something like, well, that guy deserved to get punched for the way that he was roughing up his man. And that was it. Just wipe off any blood and let's keep going. It was a different NBA back then. Hall of Fame referee Norm Strom was similar to Borgia in one way. Strom refereed the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and he had the highest road win percentage of any referee in the NBA. And here's what I mean. In the NBA, the home team wins around 60% of the time, meaning that the road team wins around 40% of the time. But when Earl Strom was refereeing a game, the road team won 45% of the time. He developed that reputation of being friendly to the road team, just like Borgia. Now, as Earl Strom would describe it, he said that most referees tended to subconsciously side with the home team so as not to get yelled at by the home crowd. He claimed that most referees were intimidated by the crowd and would make calls for the home team, whereas he was not intimidated by the crowd and always called the game as evenly as he could. Now, that was his explanation for why the road team won a higher percentage of their games when he was the referee. Now, another referee from the 1950s was Pat Kennedy, who was also in the Hall of Fame. The thing that Kennedy had was that he loved being the center of attention. Now, that is very different from today. In today's NBA, the referee should never be the center of attention, and if a referee ever gets into a newspaper story about the game, then that referee must have blown a huge call. But in the 1950s, the referees made it into the game story in the newspaper all the time. In some cases, the referees were almost as famous as the players. And that is the kind of referee that Pat Kennedy was. He would blow his whistle extra loud, gesture more flamboyantly with his arms. Nearly every call he made was extra demonstrative. For example, if he called a foul for charging, he would point at the player and yell, you, oh, what you just did. And he would keep pointing at that player so that everyone in the arena knew who was guilty. He once called Bud Palmer of the Knicks for a blocking foul. Of course, Palmer was arguing that the offensive player should be called for charging. Kennedy was not going to change his mind, but Palmer put his hands together, begging for Kennedy to change the call. Kennedy simply walked over to the scores table and announced that Palmer was getting a common foul for blocking and a technical foul for praying. I mean, that's a true story. In one way, it almost felt like the Wild West of refereeing. The officials would just call whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. And I'm not saying that that's what they did, but it sure felt like that for some teams in the 1950s and 60s. But like I said, each referee was free to develop their own style and their own tendencies. The coaches and players had to get used to it. And this is something else that you may not believe. Back in the 1950s, plane travel was still very rare in the NBA. Most teams traveled by train from city to city. The NBA also loved scheduling doubleheaders, usually at Madison Square Garden, which was the largest arena in the league. You might have the Lakers and the Celtics play each other in the first game, and then in the second game, that would be the hometown Knicks, perhaps against the Warriors. So there were many games where the home team and the away team had to both travel immediately after the game to New York to play in a doubleheader the next night, and there was typically only one overnight train between any two cities. So two teams might be playing in Rochester, spending an entire game yelling at each other, battling for points, and yelling at the referees, and there might have even been a big fight between the two teams. And then both teams and the referees had to get on the same train to travel to New York City to play again the next night. They would all end up in the bar car throwing back a few beers and swapping stories. And that would be unheard of today. Well, first of all, teams do not travel together anymore since they all have their own private airplanes. And the referees travel commercial in first class. They would never all hang out together after games like they did in the 1950s. But what else were you going to do back then once you were on the train? You drop off your stuff in your compartment and then head over to the bar car to grab a drink. And lo and behold, there's your team, there's the other team, there's the referees and both coaches, all hanging out together and sharing a drink. It was wild. But that is why refereeing was so different in the old school days of the NBA. Back then, players and referees had more of a relationship from having to travel together via train regularly. And because the games were not recorded, it allowed the referees to develop their own individual styles. And there was no office of officiating yet. That would be developed later. Back in the old days, it was just the commissioner that oversaw refereeing. And if I am being honest, I would love to get into a time machine and travel back to the early 1950s and see a few NBA games. It would be amazing and eye-opening. So there you have it. That is what refereeing was like in the old school days. Thanks for listening. Join us next time when we share the story of how ABA contracts were structured and how it impacted salaries in the NBA. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you'll find shorter historical posts as well as comments and discussion starters on today's game. I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care and see you soon.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.